I'm Andy Orem. I'm talking today with Matthew McCullough, who works at GitHub. He's also an O'Reilly author, and he's contributed a good deal to the new edition of the book Version Control with Git, which is has a chapter now on GitHub. And we're going to talk today about some Git topics and why use or not use GitHub and some other things.
Well, hello. Thanks for having me.
What are some of the most popular features, you'd say, of GitHub? Besides just,
well, there are actually things that are just, shall I say, polish on the user interface of things that are at the very core of Git. Since Git facilitates easy branching and easy merging, it allows more people to contribute to a project while still easily managing all those contributions. So specifically to the features that you asked about, forking and pull requests, which are really user interface decorations atop of branching and merging from other contributors, those are the number one and number two things that GitHub really sees used on their site.
And you had to have some discussions with John, the other author of the book, about GitHub, I understand.
Absolutely. And I think while they were at times intense discussions, especially around the GitHub chapter, what I see as the result of those debates is that it's actually a very healthy thing for there to be private Git hosting. People can set up their own small server solution over a Samba share, over the Git protocol, over SSH on his own Linux box, or you can buy a hosted solution like GitHub or some of the other ones that are on the web. And to me, the fact that both are easy and both are legitimate options simply says that rather than being trapped down some sort of commercial path, it's would you like this flavor, that flavor, or that flavor, and you have some nice options on the table.
And we were talking about before, people, I think, choose GitHub partly for SEO, to be kind of crude about it.
And in fact, that's quite true, but I'm proud of that. The cool part is that there's a large enough community. I mean, there is now 3.17 million people actively using GitHub, which is just mind-blowing to think that's developers and designers and authors. And that means that's a lot of eyeballs and a lot of potential contributors. And one of those things about SEO and kind of juicing the fact that that's where open source tends to live is you can get some rather interesting, helpful, yet esoteric contributions. Like as I was even telling you on the Gradle book that Tim Berglund and I wrote for O'Reilly last year, we put up the example repository long before the book was anywhere near complete and solicited public contributions to those examples and actually got some with people knowing that that was directed and ending up in the book material. And nowhere else will we have had the attention or the number of eyeballs to make that work besides GitHub.
I think GitHub also gives people some confidence because it's much more likely to be around than a author's personal website.
And in fact, those URLs, to strengthen the point that you made, which I agree with, there is a industry-leading respect for URLs at GitHub. If you've noticed, we've written articles on it, and there's several people who are quite prominent in keeping URLs nice and clean. In fact, URLs are meant to describe where things permanently live. So you notice there's no $vparam equals 1792 hashbang 4715 in the URLs. In fact, it's github.com/Matthew McCullough/hello Git world. That'll be there for all the classes that I teach and until the end of my engagement there, hopefully decades from now.
And what tends to happen as people take projects off on their own directions and fork, as is now encouraged?
It's actually interesting because there's only a few cases where kind of a new leader or a new owner has emerged, but the fact that it can even happen is rather interesting. It's almost the next level of democracy for software because if a leader, or that can be a group of people, not just a single person, is doing a great job, then there's no reason for anybody but to bring those changes back into that central location. But as is sometimes the case, people lose interest in a project and they're just not maintaining it anymore. So what if someone new wants to step up to the plate and with their fork make this the more active version? And there are a couple of small examples where that's actually taken place. And no big pontification has to happen to make that the case. It simply is all the contributions are going over there to the other fork. And so people kind of walk over to the more interesting booth, if you will.
One of the things that I appreciate about GitHub is it creates a real community around a project. And by community, I mean that there's a wide range of people. Some people may be committing every day and they're really intensely programming, and other people are just checking in once in a while because they're curious about it. All these people can coexist.
Absolutely. And the fact is that that's actually a continued part of investment at GitHub is to service not the Git repo side. I don't want to entirely call that a solved problem, but it's more solved than the social side of things. The investment in the activities that we've been doing as of late are all around making it easier to be a extremophile on either end of the spectrum, whether you come once a month to the site or whether you're literally, as some people are, visiting every 10 minutes, refreshing a page from a project. And it's actually a very, very difficult problem to build a developer tool that reasonably solves both ends of that spectrum, because you could see how it could be easy to optimize for one or the other. Oh, send me an email every time something interesting happens. Well, for the occasional once a month person, maybe that works out. For the person that's there every 10 minutes, they're not going to be too interested in that constant level of pulse or ping. So it's absolutely the case that it serves both well, but boy, it's a very hard thing to accomplish.
Well, I guess GitHub helps to uh, get people listening to their users, to other people on the project.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, from an educational standpoint, just to extract from that kind of comment, with O'Reilly being so invested in education in all the different forms, what I find fascinating is that this social activity and this SEO juice that you kind of talked about for putting projects there has actually had a really nice benefit on education and computer science as a whole. People are putting up curriculums and then getting forks and pull requests to the curriculum outlines. People are putting up entire working programs. Like yesterday, we released the entire source code to the GitHub for Android project and are trying to say, here, students, newcomers to this platform, here's a polished, very proud, nicely developed example that you could look at and see from beginning to end of an entire project and its development lifecycle.
Yes, people do need to see good examples and not just toy examples, which is what they usually get in college.
Exactly. And that's the difference is the toy examples serve their purpose. I don't wish to remove them, but I think it's fair for me to say they're not enough.
Yeah, there's a lot of people predicting that college graduates in computer science will have to show they've worked on some open source project, and they may be on GitHub to fulfill their course requirements.
We are actually finding that to be the case at a few universities. I don't know if they're ready for that to be completely named, but they're large names and large institutions on both coasts, and they now have that as literally a part of the curriculum, or at least, shall we say, a soft requirement. And furthermore, what's interesting about this is that if you think about resumes and kind of back to SEO and back to kind of an online profile, open source has actually become a way for software developers to showcase what they know as opposed to say what they know, which the truthiness of that is a little bit less than show me what you can do versus tell me what you can do. And that's a difficult thing to do on an interview basis. So it's actually been really fascinating to watch not only GitHub, but especially GitHub become a place that people are actually asking for this in the job applicant process, because it gives a way for all the members of the team who are evaluating this new potential team member to go out and look and say, it's pretty good stuff. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be your absolute best work, but doing something trumps saying you know something in almost anybody's balance and weight.
Besides which, if you get a job, you're working on a team, and working on an open source project shows you can deal with people.
Which means compromise, which means healthy discussion, which means ability to articulate your point of view, especially if it disagrees with someone else. So it's nothing but, in fact, life skills, or more specifically, job skills.
Yes. Let me ask another question here. What is a feature of GitHub that you think is underutilized and you want people to know more about it?
I would say that actually is the line level comments for pull requests. You can go into a particular contribution, a particular commit, and then actually go down to the file, and then more specifically even to lines within that file, and make line level comments to someone saying, well, this doesn't follow our standard tab versus spaces indenting, or we typically don't end our JavaScript lines in semicolons, or something to that level of precision. Usually the comments are made just at the pull request level, and they're far more sweeping. But I find that people respond, especially if you're asking them to change something. The more specific you can be in the suggestion, the more willing they are to make it, because people's frustration is very often, well, they just don't like it. What should I change? And the more that you help them towards, well, all I have issue with is this little tiny piece, people are far more eager to just make that correction and then move forward with it to be merged in. So to recap, line level comments on commits and pull requests.
It's one of those things that a community should learn and should teach its members, just like other forms of etiquette or, getting things done.
And what's funny about that is there's been some comments about Git, not just GitHub, but Git in general, and people contributing to open source over the last 6 months that have been very vitriolic, and some of it, my help was completely not wanted. But it's kind of funny, because if you map that back away from software, it's like you went to the mall and there was a group of people hanging out, and you kind of just pushed your way into the group, and you're like, hey folks, it's really cool. In fact, we should all go see this movie over here. And they all kind of look at you like, who are you? You didn't even introduce yourself. I'm not sure who this gal is in the group. So the same rules that apply in kind of social situations we're learning apply in developer social situations, which are you introduce yourself, you say what you might be able to help with, you start on something small, you kind of listen for a while. You don't just come in the first day and, hello folks, I'm taking over control here. How are y'all doing?
So I'd like to ask you, where is GitHub going? What are some new things that you're working on there?
If you look at the larger developer community, the ones that have moved here are places like the JavaScript community, Node.js, Ruby community. Those are the ones that are the most strongly represented. But if you look at them as constituents of the larger software programming community, those are pretty small slices, really. So that means that we still have a lot to do for the Windows community, which you see windows.github.com. We have a desktop client that we launched a couple of weeks back in May. And we have a lot of things that we can do around Visual Studio tooling and all the things that encompass the Windows platform. So to me, we effectively have a lot more communities left to serve and to figure out the specific tooling and language needs that they might have. C#, F#, the C++ and C communities, there's a lot left to do for them.
Well, thank you.